Welcome back to Grade 8 History, Unit Number 2, Canada's Changing Society, 1890 to 1914. This is Lesson Number 24, How Were Women Fighting for Change? Before we begin today's lesson, let's consider the following. What reasons might have led to more women working outside the home and seeking more rights in the late 1800s and early 1900s? What things do you think women could have done to get more equal rights at this time? What I'd like you to do is put this video on pause now so that you can consider and write down your responses to these two questions. And let's begin. In Canada today, women officially have equal rights to men. Women can choose what clothes they wear, where they work, and how they live their lives. Women can also vote in elections. Life for women in the 1800s was very different, however. There were strict guidelines on how women were expected to act and what they could own. Women living in the 1800s were discouraged from attending university and were not allowed to vote in elections. Increasing industrialization in the 1800s and the growth of cities sparked social change as more women started looking for work outside of the home. The idea of a woman living on her own and supporting herself financially was viewed with suspicion. In response to this, organizations like the Canadian Young Women's Christian Association were formed. The YWCA provided women with a safe, affordable place to live. Women living in boarding houses provided by the YWCA were supervised and had a curfew. The YWCA also supported young women by teaching them job skills. Another group that supported women was the Canadian Women's Suffrage Association, led by Dr. Emily Stowe. Stowe had been denied admission to medical school in Canada, so she had to get her degree in the US. As a result, she pledged to help improve the lives of young Canadian women. Stowe's association fought for women's right to attend universities and to vote in elections. Lady Aberdeen was the wife of Canada's Governor-General. Instead of living a privileged life, Aberdeen founded the National Council of Women of Canada. The NCWC was committed to improve the living conditions of young working women of all social classes. Aberdeen also founded the Victorian Order of Nurses, an organization that trained young women to become nurses. Aberdeen recognized that there was a desperate need for doctors and hospitals in rural and isolated areas. The Vaughan could provide medical support to people living in these areas. Nurses also provided care during wartime. In 1899, the Canadian Army Nursing Service was created as part of the medical department of the Canadian Army. As part of the military, women were given the same rank and pay as an Army lieutenant. And this photo here was taken during the Boer War, around 1900. My question to you is, what does this photo tell you about the experience of nurses at this time? Please put the video on pause now so that you can take a closer look at this photo and write down your response to the question in blue. Now let's proceed. Most women in all classes of society were also working as mothers and wives. The work of many women's organizations included improving the education and living conditions of young mothers and wives. After her son died from drinking contaminated milk, Adelaide Hoodless devoted her life to teaching the public, and women in particular, about food safety, nutrition, and hygiene. Hoodless went on to form the Women's Institute in 1897. The Women's Institute opened more than 500 branches across Canada with the purpose of teaching women domestic science. And this is a picture of the front of the textbook on domestic science that Titlis wrote. My question is, what elements of this picture tell you about Hoodless's ideas about food safety and hygiene? Please put the video on pause so you can take another look at this picture and then write down your response to the question in blue. And let's continue. In the early 1900s, the social lives of many women revolved around the church. However, new social problems such as unemployment were rising due to more women working outside of the home. Also, the importance of the church was changing. In response to social problems, a new movement called the social gospel gained popularity in Canada. Social gospel promoted the idea that society could be improved if everyone worked together and used Protestant values to overcome harmful social problems. Many leaders of the movement, including Reverend J.S. Wordsworth, were able to influence Canada socially and politically. And this photo on the left was taken in 1904 at the All People's Mission in Winnipeg. What does this photo tell you about the children who are being helped by this mission? Please put the video on pause so you can take a closer look at this photo and write down your response to the question in blue. And let's continue. In order to succeed in their mission to make a better society, social gospel leaders realized that they needed government funding. In order to improve their chances of getting more government support, leaders of the movement understood that women needed to have the right to vote so that they could vote for legislation that would support church programs. The social gospel movement shared common ideas with the temperance movement. Both the social gospel and the Women's Christian Temperance Union, or WCTU, believed that by banning alcohol there would be less domestic violence and small crime rates. Both groups supported the movement for women's right to vote in order to help bring about more supporting families that lived well-controlled lives. Despite the common goals of the social gospel, suffrage, and temperance movements, the groups did at times come into conflict with each other. For example, Lady Aberdeen felt it was important for her NCWC to unite as many women as possible, and she supported Adelaide Hoodless's efforts in domestic science. However, some temperance leaders were critical of NCWC members for drinking wine at their dinners. The WCTU wanted the NCWC to focus on women's right to vote instead of non-political issues. And this photo shows Lady Aberdeen and her husband, Lord Aberdeen, at an NCWC meeting. My question to you is, why do you think Lord Aberdeen was also placed in the center of the photo? Please put the video on pause so you can consider this question and write down your response. And let's carry on. Many women's organizations were led by Caucasian upper and middle class women. They tended to focus on issues facing Caucasian women and did not allow black women to become members. Only a handful of women's organizations reached out and supported black women. Just as black men formed their own organizations, so too did black women. The Colored Women's Club of Montreal was formed by the wives of black porters. Their goals were to fight poverty and discrimination. The club provided winter clothing to newcomers from the Caribbean, helped the homeless and the unemployed, and provide counseling for unwed mothers. Take a look at this photo here. How might this photo show that Ontario House helped black women improve their status in society? Please put the video on pause so that you can take a look at this photo and write down your response to the question in blue. women were also beginning to participate in other public activities such as sports. By the end of the 1800s, suffragette leaders were encouraging women to participate in sports because of the health benefits. Usually, only middle-class Caucasian women or female private school students had the time and opportunity to play in sports, and they were restricted to sports that were considered appropriate for women, such as rowing and skating. In the early 1900s, some women were able to take part in other quote unquote unsuitable sports, such as field hockey, baseball, and lacrosse. Take a look at this photo on the left. How do you think this photo shows progress for women in sports since the early 1900s? Please put the video on pause so you can write down your response to this question. All right, and time to wrap things up. So let's conclude today's final history lesson and video by discussing the following. Of all the women we learned about in today's lesson, which one or ones do you think are the most historically significant? And please explain why you feel this way. And number two, do you feel that there are any similarities between the issues women face in the early 1900s and the issues women face today? If so, what similarities do you see? So one final time, folks, you're going to put this video on pause so that you can write down your responses to these questions. If you don't feel that you can do that right now, it means you need to go back and watch this video at least one more time, and then when you're ready, please put the video on pause. All right, and just in closing, folks, thank you for taking this trip back in time with me. I hope all 24 of these lessons have been useful to those of you in my class and in other classes um, around North America and the world. Until we meet again, this concludes today's video.